It's stuck in your head now.
It is. It is. All right, folks. I'm here with ATL Grow, Milan Turner, one and only.
In the building.
And we have had a hell of a week.
It's been a great week. Long week, a lot of hard work, but it's been an incredible week.
Let's do origin story, as always, per usual, and then we'll get into what we're doing here. I asked you this the first time we talked. So, and I do want to set that stage. I knew this was going to be fantastic because the first time we ever talked, we were on the phone somewhere around 2.5 to 3 hours.
2.5 to 3 hours.
And we may have talked about gardening maybe for 10 minutes of it.
I think we spent more time talking about Wu-Tang Clan, Tribe Called Quest, Black Star, hip hop, skateboarding, everything but gardening.
We came up at the same time, and I think we may have been separated at birth slightly.
Yeah.
And by that, probably a lot. But
yeah.
but no, we really hit it off. Again, one of those things, we watched you for months and months. You shouted us out. Like, man, I really like this guy. And this was, I don't know, 800, 1,600 followers kind of thing. And I think I told you then, we're not hung up on numbers.
Right.
And since, we've been working together, and when I say working together, I think the first week I spent with you was in August, and then we've been doing some stuff. It's all been behind the scenes for months. And even the stuff that we're doing this week, people really won't see it for another few months because of what it is. But just wanted to get you out there to our folks. So if they haven't figured out by now, you're definitely within the inner circle. But again, we watched you for months. And I was like, I can't wait anymore. I remember telling Katie, I said, I want to call him and just see how it goes. And then we were going to talk about it and then talk to you about what we were going to talk to you about. And man, you and I got on the phone and just ripped it up.
Everything changed.
Yeah. And from then I was like, all right, you're our guy. This is what we want to do. And here we are.
Yeah. So it's funny. You mentioned the origin story, and it's really two-tier for me. I've got how I got started in the gardening, and I'm not a big time veteran when it comes to gardening. I've only been gardening for 3 years now, and this is actually my first year in raised beds and larger scale, I should say. I mean, it's still small scale, but larger plants and plant outs. And I'm like many, I'm a COVID generation gardener. Started purely accidental. My wife was out grocery shopping one day, and this was at the height of COVID, so stores are running low on everything. And there's one dish that she makes, and it uses basil. And honestly, we weren't even locked into using fresh basil then. It was just basil concentrate, stuff like that.
That tube basil.
That tube of basil.
God
that's exactly it.
That's the worst toothpaste ever.
It's not in the toothpaste. That'll wake you up in the morning. But yeah, so, she couldn't find that. It was when the stores were running low on everything, and, she couldn't get something as simple as that. She looked for the prepackaged basil and the packs of that, and they didn't even have the sprigs. But sure enough, they had the fresh plants, the fresh herbs. And not just, one or two, they had plenty. And so she ended up bringing...
Talking about the 6-inch pots, the living...
Yep, that living herb. You take it out the plastic and water it, and, it kind of does its own thing. So she got that, and so she used what she needed for her dish, for her recipe, and essentially was just going to throw it away. We weren't plant people. I can't say that anymore, but we left it just kind of sitting in the kitchen. And you know how it was in those days of COVID. You pacing throughout the house. You weren't going a whole lot of places, and just kind of watched the plant, and it got a little droopy. And I was like, I'll throw some, I'll water it. It kind of stood back up, and basil's super dramatic. It'll fall over.
Right. That's right.
You give it a little water though, and suddenly it's I'm back. And so, I just kind of connected with that in this weird way, right? And then so it started to look a little off. It started to get really, really stretched out. And I've got a friend who, she was more into gardening in the past, and I was like, hey, what do I need to do with this plant? And she goes, it's leggy. It's like, what? And she was like, your plan is getting leggy. And I was like, what are you saying to me right now? And she was like, it needs sunlight. It is stretched out because it needs the sun. I was like, "So why didn't you just say that?"
Right.
Right?
All this
Uh,
mystery around everything.
yeah. Like these gardening terms, which is so funny because now, I'm one of those. I use all the gardening terms. And so I took from
Yeah,
that.
I did peep at your bookshelf today when we were in your office, and it's packed.
I am full blown garden nerd. I do all the books, all the videos now, and so we'll kind of touch on that nerd side a little bit more. But yeah, so that sparked it, right? And so just having that one plant in the house, it kind of triggered this memory of my grandmother. She was a mother of 10. Her and my grandfather lived right here in Atlanta. And I spent a lot of time over there, right? And so it kind of started, when all the shortages are hitting and it's just making you think about things really differently, right? And so one of the things that I remembered, what the memory that it triggered was that she had a front yard garden of wash bins, the big metal wash tubs, right? And she grew like tomatoes and peppers are what I really, really remember. And she had just really, really been on my mind a lot. And it just something just triggered it, like right from growing that and from the hard times that were happening with COVID and just thinking about, the kind of stuff they endured.
Yeah, this is nothing that she had not been through at
Absolutely.
least 2, 3 times in her life.
Right. And then the whole concept of, victory gardens, we started calling them again. And that's secondary generation type thing as well, right? So what it triggered in me was like, hey, I am just way too detached from my food and way too reliant on grocery stores and stuff like that. And in my area, that's extremely risky because, Atlanta has a high percentage of food deserts, and we can get into that like later. But so that one basil plant triggered me wanting to grow other fresh herbs. So went to the big box store, got some more basil, oregano, thyme, and I just grabbed those really traditional fresh herbs that you see in the big box stores. I bought two of each one because I knew for sure I was going to kill them all,
Right.
and got some potting soil and some plastic pots, and so we were living in a condo then. I mean, not a condo, a townhouse, with not really any personal green space to speak of, but there was a little area covered in straw that the landscapers maintained right off the patio. I was like, well, I don't really want to sit here and look at straw, all the time, and I can tell they don't really want to take care of it. So
I feel
came
like in every townhome and apartment, there's a couple of people that are just green hanging out of every window and
yeah,
patio and porch that they can. So I can
yeah.
see how that could happen.
But mine was the exact opposite. I had just a concrete slab, you know what I mean, and then this
So a
little
blank canvas.
blank canvas completely. Aside from like my barbecue grills and my patio chair and stuff like that, that's just how I'd viewed that outside space up to that point, right? When something gets in my head, it just kind of eats at me, right? So I was like, I want a herb garden, and I don't want to just put a couple pots out on the ground. I want something that looks nice and is functional. And so I talked to my wife, and you looked on the internet for some ideas, and just didn't really see what I wanted. So talked to her about it in some kind of way. She understood what my idea was, and so she sketched it up and she put it in the computer. And we headed back to the big box store and got some one buys and the stair trimming, the
Sure.
outline stairs. So I wanted multi-level. So I bought that and the wood screws and everything and came back home and told the kids, I was like, hey, we're going to spend the day actually doing something productive. We're going to get off the computers, get off the video games. And so they came out and they still didn't really understand it yet, but I had them. They did a lot of the cutting. They did, drilled the pilot holes. They drove the screws because I just kind of wanted to, build those same build memories with them of just planning that idea. We can do some of this stuff. Yeah, that's a lot of what COVID was about. It was people just finding other things and other interests, right? So sat outside that day, no joke, probably 8 hours. And of the time that we've been in the townhome, that was the most that I spent outdoors on that patio. I'd run out and grill or something like that, but it wasn't a space that I just sat out and hung out in.
Sure.
That's where it really started to build up, right? I'm starting to cook with fresh herbs, and now, my dishes are turning out way better. And I was like, wait a minute, like, I consider myself a decent cook. It's nothing spectacular.
Kitty cat.
So yeah, I'm not. I don't consider myself a great cook or anything like that, right? But when I started using the fresh herbs, everything started tasting a lot better, and it was like, oh, okay, so
That's why people do this.
right, yes, exactly that. It's like, oh, so when you don't use the dried herbs that have been sitting on the shelf for 2 years, stuff actually tastes a lot better, And I'll tell you one, that was a really, really simple change where it really sparked for me. And it goes back to basil again. And you'll hear me talk about basil all the time. Basil is my thing, right? And so one day, just being funny, I picked a few basil leaves, and it was a Friday night, and we were just chilling at home. We did frozen pizza, right? And so I was just teasing the kids, and I sprinkled some fresh chopped basil on top of the pizza. Oh, Dad, this is actually really good. What did you do? And it was like, that's just fresh herbs. And, not that they haven't had fresh vegetables and fresh, stuff out at other restaurants and stuff like that, but putting it on a heavily processed frozen pizza was just enough for them. It was like, oh, this is pretty good. This took that super simple experience and it changed it. And so from there, man, it was like full speed ahead.
And that's what I think happens whenever people start to cook more, start to garden more. It's like, well, it starts with basil, and then maybe it's a tomato, and then maybe it's a pepper, and it's this evolving thing into which you do everything better or different. It seems to me like gardening and farming is such a life-changing event for so many people that we talk to. Remember, the very first time I talked to you, I said, "What was the spark?" And I always try to, whenever we're feeling new people, ask, "What's the spark? What was it?" Because it's always that. It's always one, and nobody ever has to think of it. It's some super specific instance of. For you, it was basil. For me, it was the notion of square foot gardening. You go down all these rabbit holes that a lot of people do, and that's why whenever you're talking about plants getting leggy and it takes a minute, now we're all speaking the same language, and it's just all encompassing thing for a while, until it becomes just a part of your everyday life, and you can't think about going back to anything else.
So it's funny you mentioned two really key points there for me. One, that evolutionary part of it, and square foot gardening, and that makes me laugh so hard because,
which is not the first time we've had this concentric circle of our talks.
This is how all our conversations always go. It's even when you aren't talking directly to me, when you send me voice messages and send me other instructions, you've got this knack of knowing exactly what I'm thinking, and that's why we have such a good time together. But yeah, so the evolution of my garden from the herb garden, right, is I started growing the herbs. I was like, ooh, I want to grow more, and it was back to thinking about my grandmother, right, and I knew she grew the tomatoes and peppers, so it's like I want to grow some of my own vegetables too. And I'm not at the level that I can replace everything from the grocery store, but my approach was, I'm going to take like the 5 or 6 things that we buy from the grocery store literally every week, and I'm going to try to grow some at home, right? So back to the big box store, and I stumbled upon these self-watering planters, and they're just plastic containers, but they've got a reservoir at the bottom that holds water. And then they hold like 1.5 cubic feet of potting mix, right? So I got 3 of those. I got the potting mix. Actually, I bought gardening soil first on accident and had to go take that back to the store to get potting mix. So I made that rookie mistake. So I had 3 of the planters. I got, again, I'm still thinking I'm going to kill everything. I bought 3 tomatoes. I bought 3 cucumbers, 3 peppers, basically 1 for each box of basil and like a marigold.
And isn't it interesting that when you actually pay attention to the plants, they don't die?
It's funny, this journey started to teach me like not just about growing food, but how little I knew about my food growing, right? And what I mean by that, so I told you I put a squash, tomato, cucumber, basil, marigold, and a pepper. There were 6 plants, right? The box said, "Oh, you can do 6 plants," and I was like, "Whatever, that's what the box says, right?" And I'm just looking at seedlings. I have not taken the moment to think about mature plants,
how big they're going
to get, right? And so they started off as just a little baby plants, and I had them in the box, and I'm proud, right? And that's when it starts. I'm snapping pictures and posting to Instagram, and you see that post. One day you're young and hip, and the next day you're posting videos to Instagram. I wasn't maybe the young and hip part, but I was posting to Instagram. A week goes by and they're starting to grow, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is cool." And week 2, and progress pics every day, and again, we weren't going anywhere. Everything was shut down, so all my focus was, working from home. Got all this free time. I hang out with my kids. We do stuff, and then I was like, "Hey, let's go check out the plants." You know what I mean? So, and then they really started to grow, and they hit that kind of like fertilizer line, and the squash and the zucchini plants just explode. I mean, all this lush green coming out of the beds, and I'm feeling real good now. The zucchini leaves are like, one leaf is twice the size of my hand, and the flowers are starting to come in. It's funny, you see each stage, and at each level of development with the plant, your level of love of gardening grows exponentially. So the squash plant starts putting out squash, and those are one of those things. I won't say we bought it all the time, but it was one of those that I wanted to have on hand.
And now you're forced to eat more.
Yeah, so they
squash every meal.
That's the part they don't talk about. But what was wild though, for me, is like I said, I'm not a squash hater. I actually enjoy squash quite a bit. But when I started getting them, and I learned just enough to know at home you don't have to grow for the giant monster size. You harvest them at baby size for some stuff. And so I tried that and sliced up some squash just raw and ate it like that. And I was like, oh, wow. So it's that same thing with like the fresh herbs, right? It's like, this tastes way better than the grocery store. And I was like, huh, okay.
And through that, you can do more with it.
Oh, for sure.
And then you don't get as tired.
You don't get tired of it at all, right? Because all these options, start to open up. You can let it get a little bit bigger, and you still get great flavor, but like you mentioned, it's also a heavy producer. And that's where I got in trouble though. That grow box it's roughly 2 foot by 2 foot. And here I've got a squash and 5 other plants. The squash alone would have made that box struggle. So my other plants, they're growing, but not at a great rate. And so watching it, and I could tell the squash plant was starting to struggle. And so start doing a little research, and lo and behold, and that's where I discovered square foot gardening, right? And it gave me the spacing guides on what the recommendations of what each plant need. And sure enough, that one needs 2 foot. So I was like, well, I can sacrifice the squash plant and get just that, and get the rest of the vegetables going. So sure enough, that's what I did. After I harvested a few, squash and zucchini, I went ahead and cut those plants because they were so big. They were just falling out the side of the box. Right. And so I did that. And then about a week, like I just saw this surge of growth from all the other plants. And so now the tomatoes are starting to form. The cucumbers took off and was able to harvest like pretty quickly. So now I've got tomatoes coming up, cucumbers, I've got peppers starting to form much slowly. But I was like, oh, okay. So this is what happens when you do it right. But I didn't get discouraged at that point. It was just like, okay, this just tells me I've got a lot to learn. And that's what triggered, I started buying books. I really, really got heavy into YouTube. So many people were jumping on gardening on Instagram. And I was like, well, I'm not going to bug my friends with all my gardening posts. So I'm going to spin up another channel. And sure enough, that's where, my love of Atlanta and everything. And it was like, well, Atlanta Grow. I like that. That's kind of that feel, right? And so I don't know. I do some stuff with marketing professionally. So I was like, well, I want a little logo and put that on Instagram. And then it went into overdrive. Like there's daily pictures, but there was no judgment, at that point, once you tapped into that gardening community, because now everybody's posting pictures every day of their progress. And that community is so welcoming and so inviting, right? And a large part of that is because so many of us were new and we were all learning.
Not that long ago. It's easy to remember what it's like.
Yeah. Like, so it was like, you'd see other people and it was like, oh, I'm growing this and I'm growing that. And it wasn't always about everybody growing the same thing, but it was like, ooh, I see this and that variety. And that was another part, right? You go in the grocery store and it's one type of yellow squash, one type of green zucchini. You may get 3 or 4 different varieties of tomato, but they're never by name. It's tomatoes on the vine.
Right.
You know what I mean? Then I start seeing all these wild different patterns on tomatoes. It's like, ooh, I want to grow that. And I'll be honest, sometimes I grow stuff just because I like the way that it look in a picture. But that's the freedom that growing it at home on your own gives you. And that, I'm not going to lie, I enjoy that part a lot.
At some point, you did move from the townhouse
Mm-hmm.
and you moved into the house that we've been at. A lot more space,
Yep.
a lot more opportunities.
Yep.
How was that transition going from 10 square feet or just a few boxes to the room that you have now?
So it's interesting. You learn a lot growing in small space. And to be honest, growing in the small space is what led me to my discovery of Bootstrap Farmer. So the first year I did all my gardening from starts, right? And so it's another thing about the gardening community, man. Everybody is so great about teaching you other stuff and sharing other stuff. And the next season come spring, everybody's like, oh, your stuff did so good. You got to start from seed. And I was a little overwhelmed. I was a lot overwhelmed. I won't even say a little. I was like, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of space. I don't have a greenhouse, but I start seeing other setups, and we did have a garage. So I popped up that metal shelving unit you see a lot of people using. And again, back to the big box store, and I bought that, the gardening, the seed starting kit, the super flimsy plastic, but it had the pods, it had the cover. It's got everything that you need to grow seeds, right? And so,
and it's the only choice.
It's the only choice when you're in the store, because I hadn't learned enough to, do a whole lot on the internet yet. Also, again, just being so intimidated by seed starting out, I didn't know, how this was going to go. To my surprise, it actually went really well. I started quite a few seeds, probably 2 racks on that shelving unit full. I did some flowers. I did a bunch of tomato stuff. I had no idea where any of this stuff was going to go, but when you're starting seeds, it's like the same work to plant 1 seed, you can plant 10. And I got the room, started the seeds. That's going well. And then the hardening off process, which to this day I still hate. I still don't enjoy that part. But so I'm with this super limited space, so I've got to haul these trays indoors and out multiple times a day. And I was carrying a tray and plump, tray hit the floor. I yelled some things, screamed some things, and I was like, that's it. Never again. And about that time I had started to kind of see Bootstrap Farmer on Instagram, and I knew about the trays, and I was like, I'm getting me some heavy duty trays that won't break, that I won't drop, and I am not going through this again. I was furious. So sure enough, I went and bought, no joke, I actually think I bought them before I even cleaned up the stuff that was on the ground, because that's just how mad I was. And I remember you all had the ad that you all had the post with the kettlebell and the heavy duty trays. I'm getting me some real equipment. If I'm going to do this, I want to do it the right way. And I just don't want to be dealing with trying to do this over and over again with these little flimsy trays. And so that sparked my journey with Bootstrap. Never in my imagination that I think I could go from hauling some trays out the garage to be able to sit with y'all now. It's been, like I say, that word evolution and that trigger. So from there, the love of gardening is strong now. Like this is a part of me. This is something I want to do long term. And so we actually were renting the townhome that we talked about, right? And so the opportunity came up for us to purchase, and we were pretty happy there, to be honest. But it was like, well, if we're gonna go through the mortgage process and everything, and I've kind of started to like being outdoors more. I kind of wanted a little bit more space, a little bit more outdoor space, right? And so me and my wife talked and was like, well, let's just go look at some houses in the area. And that led to the home we're in now. I knew and talked to my real estate agent. I told her, I was like, I want a big sunny yard. I was like, if it can be a south facing backyard, even better. And she gardened, so she understood it. And so the very first house a list we pulled up to, and I'm seeing the yard, and I was like, oh yeah, I can do a ton here. I honestly walked the yard before we even went in the house, because let's be honest, that's really all I cared about at that point. Looked at a few houses, and that one just felt like home. So that one really, really spoke to us. Of course, it had all of our other needs too: room for the kids, home office, and space for my wife to be able to do her thing too. But it had my yard, so it's just under a half acre, and the ideas are just running wild, right? And so
It's another blank canvas.
yeah, a completely blank canvas. But then when I went back after and they tell you don't fall in love with the place before you get it. Everybody falls in love when they're looking, right? And so we fell in love with the place. And that night I was looking at the listing, scanning, and it said something. Basically, what I found out, it was on a septic system. And I was like, oh, what's the impact of that on gardening? So start doing some research, and there's a lot of back and forth about impact on planting of different type of material and the risk of septic systems. So I was like, well, I can still garden, right? I can pick the right area. I can't do the full backyard farm that I really, really wanted to. But I can start my small garden. And so that's what I did with 3 or 4 raised beds, and I got more area to buy to start seeds and stuff outdoors. So it's like, oh yeah, it's time to get me some more seed starting equipment. So back to Bootstrap Farmer, and I got the 32 cell trays, which I still use and love, and some other stuff. And at, back to that seed starting, hardening off process. The seed starting part I love. I could do that all day. But we had a frost coming. I had to move some starts in and outdoors that day. But it was so much simpler now because I've got the heavy duty 2010 trays and I've got the flats and everything. I was like, okay, I don't hate this. This is actually pretty cool. And I was just sharing with the community, like, you know, that's what we do in the gardening community online. We post our wins and losses. And if you find something that works, you know, you share it. And so I posted the pic of the starts on the washer and dryer. And that's when Katie reached out and she was like, you know, she told me like how much you all appreciated that. And I was like, I wasn't even thinking about, you know, connecting because I was such a I had 1,500 followers at the time, but it was just in the gardening community. And so when she reached out, it was like, wow, like this company legit cares about the people that they work with, that they're customers, you know. And so that kind of just that sparked, and end of the day, I thought that was the end of it. And then so she reaches back out and she's like, hey, you mind talking with my boss a bit? And I was like, I mean, sure. Like I had no idea what that meant. And so a couple days later, I don't even think it was a couple days. It might have been that same day. I get the call from Nick, and I don't even know how that conversation started, honestly, because we just vibed on this level.
I can't remember how it started either, but I tell you when it turned is, we were talking about making some videos, and I was super clear with you. It's like, look, we do this collaboratively, and that music is a super important part of it for me.
That's it.
And then that's what got us going down.
That's it.
The music.
You're exactly right.
And it just didn't end for hours.
No joke. Like that, and that is it. You're exactly right. I wasn't even making videos yet. Instagram was kind of making that turn. You know, for us in the gardeners, we were pretty comfortable with the still photos because, you know, we got the best looking photo of our harvest of the growing plant or whatever. And so you planted the seed, no pun intended, about, hey, you thought about doing a video. And I was like, I mean, not really. I don't know where to start. And so you started telling me about, what you did with video, and you're exactly right. You mentioned music, and what you told me is you listen to music and you pick a track before you even start the video. I was like, that's really interesting. And then we started talking about concerts and shows we've been to, seeing Wu-Tang live, seeing Tribe Called Quest live. Nas was another big one. And so we connected and vibed on music, and it was like, I don't know, music means so much to me. And us just kind of growing up at that time, that really high point of hip hop. And it was just wild, we
and it's so crazy how these two intersect.
Yeah.
From people that grew so far apart from each other,
who were supposed to be as different as could be.
Right.
And we connected on music. We started talking about other stuff.
We got real obscure into music. I mean, we didn't just hit the highlights. We got down some
pretty deep stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's what did it for me. Is like, all right, this is who we want to work with. For sure.
We went crate digging.
Right.
We went crate digging and talking about, we spent an hour talking about samples, I believe, which is just crazy, but that's the impact that music can have. And so then you and I talked, and we were getting on real well, and you say, well, I want to come out to Atlanta. And I was like, I mean, dude, I've got a couple raised beds. I don't have a farm. I don't even have.
It's just one of those things where when you know, even though everybody at Bootstrap at least gardens and sometimes, has farmed for a living and is still growing, servicing the gardening community because of the smaller quantities, it's a difficult proposition when you're used to moving volume, the packaging. And we recently talked on another podcast about, how shipping affects the prices of smaller quantities, and it goes up. And we are the most expensive tray on the market for a reason. Mm-hmm. But whenever these prices raise up or don't decline as the volume drops, we catch a little flack for it. The need is out there, especially as gardeners like you are just expanding. Mm-hmm. This is an effort for us to understand currently what that is looking like, and to work with somebody that we like to say that we always have a farmer in residence, and to some degree, right now that's Carl, and the Naked Gardeners. We're doing more stuff with them, and we have pretty tight group of folks that we work with, Jill Reagan and that kind of thing. But we didn't really have anybody like just in the gardening space. And then when we started noticing you, and like I said, we watched you for quite a while before Katie reached out. And the farmer spotlights are obvious. It was something at the time where it was like, we're going to hit some people up and see how it goes. And it was just so easy with you. The what you gave us back was above and beyond. It's like, all right, he has the eye for it. He has the talent for it. And again, let's do something. We didn't even know at the time really what it was, but let's work together. And that's when we came out. And
I owe a lot of that to Katie. That blog post about killed me. Just get one blog post out, but she was so cool and so easy to work with. I just felt like part of the family. Like even from that, well before you even came. So it was like this is cool, and so I told my wife, and she knows me and crazy ideas. I was like, hey, this guy from Bootstrap Farmer, he wants to come hang out for the week, and she was just like, okay. She was like, whatever you want to do, just go for it. She was just like, just go, try it. I was like, but he wants me to be on video and start doing all this stuff. It's just like, okay. I was like, no, I don't. That's
and
not
let's
me.
not glaze over that your wife does have a channel. She plays the game. She knows.
Right. She's in the sewing and the skating space, and so she'd been on YouTube and she'd been on Instagram and walking in the sewing shops and fabric stores in Atlanta, and people recognizing her, and so shout out to Tip Stitch on that. So I was not totally clueless to it, but it just wasn't ever anything that I sought out for. I'm way more comfortable,
and I think that's
camera.
why it works. Yep. Is because you didn't seek it out. You just have a natural talent for, and I've seen it in that you sit down, you describe what you're doing, your process. It's not what's popular right now in that it's not in your face, it's not crazy, you're not dancing. Obviously, we're in a very chilled out space right now, but that's how you're presenting information. Yep. And I think people like that break. It's just not in your face. It's not short form. These are great tips that I've learned myself. Here it is.
You're exactly right. My vibe is super chill. It's funny. So we spent a week together in August. You taught me how to set up camera and video, and just doing my phone and stuff like that. So I started making the reels, right? And, putting them out to Instagram. And again, the garden community, they're so cool and so supportive. They responded well to everything. And so everybody starts saying, oh, you should put them on TikTok. You should put them on TikTok. And I was like, I'm 40 something. I don't even know how to use TikTok, right? And one, I ain't dancing, I ain't singing, I ain't doing none of that. Like my stuff is I just like to garden, right? And and again, no, I don't mean that in any way disrespectful to the others. That's just me. You won't catch me dancing for any reason, right?
But that's the thing. You're staying true to what you like,
yep.
what you're about. And again, I'm glad you brought that up. It is no disrespect to people that do that, because look, man, that's them, and I don't want them to do anything other than what's them. But it's the quality of you being able to sit down and share what you got going on in the manner what you do. I mean, I love it, and obviously, especially the last 3 months, a lot of other people have picked up on it.
Yep. So you taught me how to do the videos, right? And so I listened to my kids, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna post them to TikTok too. After,
what's the worst that could happen?
What's the worst that can happen? I got 84 followers on TikTok. Who cares? So the very first video with me on camera, I didn't want to make it. I was mad. I was like, Nick's got me out here. I'm by myself. I got these mics on. I'm talking to myself.
People driving by honking.
What
is this guy doing?
But sure enough, I planted some carrot seeds, square foot gardening style, in my raised bed. Posted the video. feeling some kind of way because I don't want to be on camera. I'm worried about what people are going to think. And, you know, side note, screw what everybody thinks. Do what you love. And everything else will work out. PSA over. So, yeah, post that video. Saturday night, you know, I spent 3 hours to get this 45-second. Framing's terrible, the audio is terrible, I sound super robotic even more than normal. I did have a nice little chill beat to it though, so I was feeling good about that. Got my lo-fi going. Then I wake up the next morning and my phone has all these alerts and I was like, I don't even post to TikTok. You know, I don't even know how to read messages on TikTok, right? But I've got all these notifications from TikTok. And so I told you I had 84 followers before that, but then that view that morning, like 5,000 views. And I was like, what is this? Like, did I do something wrong? Did I post the wrong thing to TikTok? And so it hit 5,000. And then like an hour later, it's at 10,000. I was like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. So now I'm showing the kids, right? Because I'm feeling pretty good about myself now. And by the time that I got it to show to them, it jumped another 10,000 like in an hour. And now my mind is just like, what? I don't really understand what's happening.
Nobody does. I mean, it's you can't put
so
your finger
you
on
start
it.
seeing this in real time, and it exponential growth, like it was my first viral moment, right? So it starts getting tens of thousands of views per hour. And then all the comments start coming. I was like, oh, I didn't know that's where where carrots came from. I thought we planted baby carrots. And being brutally honest, I'd never given any thought to what carrot seeds look like or what the growing process was. I had grown carrots in the containers before, some different varieties, but it just reminded me of that same feeling I had before about just how little we know about growing our own food. You know, we just grab it from the grocery store. And so that resonated with people. And over the course of the next 2 days, it skyrocketed to 3.5 million views on TikTok. My account went from 84 followers to 70,000 followers in a span of a couple of days. And people started asking questions, and then I started, making other videos, answering questions, showing my setup, and that's where full circle moment. So much of what I learned about gardening, it was from online, from YouTube and Instagram. And I was like, okay, so other people are interested, other people are curious, and I've got enough of a setup that I can share with them some of these simpler growing methods and growing habits. And so that was enough to make me get over the hatred of being on that side of the camera, right? And I immediately reached out to you and I was like, dude, the stuff you showed me, I did a horrible job with it, but it went viral. So now we got to talk. You got to teach me more stuff so that I can be good now, because, I'm fine being bad in front of 84 people, but being bad in front of 70,000 is a whole different thing, right? And so that was another thing that I kind of learned, this interesting moment. So Instagram was my people. That's my tribe. I had, by that time, about 3,000 followers there, but it's wild because we're a community. Like, we don't know each other off Instagram, but when somebody hasn't posted in a few days, or somebody's experiencing other, growing problems or not growing problems, right? And so you connect in this weird ways. But TikTok, they were all strangers, so I didn't really.
I get that, yeah.
You know what I mean? I was happy about it, but I was like, that's not really my people. And so that exact same video I had posted to Instagram the exact same night, exact same time. And it sat idle for 2 weeks, like 500 views, which was even low for Instagram. And, anybody who's making these videos, they're lying if they tell you they don't feel some kind of way when they make a video and it doesn't do so great. So, but that one I didn't even really care about because it popped off on TikTok, and then sitting at work and my phone starts buzzing, buzzing, buzzing. I'm at work and saying Instagram, Instagram. I was like, I didn't post anything to Instagram. I don't know what it's talking about. And out of nowhere, that exact same video, planting carrot seeds, goes viral on Instagram. And it spread even faster than the TikTok one. So that one went from 500 views to over 2 million. Saw that account go from 3,000 followers to it's up 80,000. My son's texting me. He's like, it just did 60,000. It just did, 70,000. And, he's super chill. Like, he doesn't even really care about
Yeah, if anybody's
social.
more chill than you, it's your son
It's
for
my
sure.
son.
Yeah.
Yes, he is the epitome of chill and reserved. And so that was a dope feeling, a really cool feeling. Like my daughter, she got it. Like she loves social. And she was like, I can't believe both of my parents have more followers than me there. So we laugh about that. But when it registered to him, I was like, okay, we this is something, And yeah, so then I called you again. I was like, hey, same video just popped up on Instagram. It was like, we got to do something. We got to figure out a way to do something. And we'd already been talking about you coming back, but that just was that this is an opportunity for us to share, for us to teach. And you got that, right? Like you didn't come to me like, hey, let's push this, let's push that. You said, hey, I've got an idea. It's pretty far out there, but I think you're gonna like it. And so we talked, and to be honest, I didn't completely understand it, but I knew you well enough just from the talks that we had. I was like, man, let's go for it. And so that led us up to this crazy week we spent together out in below freezing weather for 3 days.
Yeah, it was cold. Yeah, well, let's get into it. I kind of think it's more important to reset up and almost piggyback on this previous conversation about what happened on social, about how you wanted to affect your immediate community. Again, we're thinking back to Atlanta, thinking back to real people. Whether you're tighter on Instagram or on TikTok, it's still a little bit of separation, right? I mean, and they're not necessarily from the area either. Atlanta's super important to you. I know that you've after this week definitely have made an impact on your neighbors coming by, driving by, walking by, whatever the case may be. The idea of this is great for what I do here to be able to see a direct impact. And that's what it's always been about. Like for me in particular, and I know a lot of people within Bootstrap, that we're not trying to change the entire world. We're just trying to, pockets of making things better, wherever we can. And I think I really struggle to find a better example than what you're setting out to accomplish through this. A, and I like this social experiment. B, not a community garden, but more of a neighborhood garden, just for the people that want to participate and that are curious. And I think you're giving people an opportunity to see things that they've never seen before. That, man, the guy from a few doors down that said he wanted, 9 or 19 years, some ungodly. Oh, I was thinking about doing that one time and I never got around to it.
Yep. 19 years. He said he lived in the neighborhood 19 years.
When you have a goal and you don't act on it for 19 years, that's something to think about. If you're, as we look back on life and think about the things we could have, should have done, I think it's important to talk about what makes up the neighborhood currently and the flow of everyday people coming and going.
So you talk about Atlanta, and I do. It's weird. I genuinely love Atlanta. It's my hometown, and when you find the people that are from Atlanta, born in Atlanta, we love it fiercely. It's a weird connection, but Atlanta is a really, really big small town. You know people when you grow up here, you know the same people even when you're from different parts of the city to different suburbs. There's just so much interconnectivity, good and bad, right? So nowadays there's the glitz and glam of Atlanta, right? We got the television shows filming right in my own neighborhood, right? Streets closed because they're filming and I've got to take a different way to work. But in that exact same neighborhood, we've got maybe two good grocery stores, right? And my main grocery store, I'm fortunate that I do have a grocery store that's, I'd estimate 2.5 miles from my house. So,
Yeah, but 2.5 miles in where you live, depending on the time of the day, can take 40 minutes, 50 minutes. And if you don't have a car, how are you going to get there?
that's it. Right. So I'm very blessed and very fortunate. Multi-car household, we get around, we don't have a problem doing stuff, but right in front of my own house, there's a MARTA bus stop, right? And
it's busy.
it's very busy. And so I have several neighbors that ride that bus daily. I see them daily. And if they're having to haul grocery, which they do, it's not if, it's when they haul grocery, that changes not only, where you shop, but how you shop. You can't jump on MARTA with a week's worth of grocery, right? So
Well, you can't buy ice cream in the summer and have to wait on a bus and then take the bus and
exactly.
then walk from the bus stop to the house.
For in our example, you can't buy a bag of lettuce, and it lasts for a week until you can get back to the
right
grocery store on MARTA, right? So, going all the way back, I told you about, just how the stores route everything. And I do have a chain grocery store in my neighborhood, but it's got one of the smallest produce sections of all its other chain competitors, right? Chain members. You start gardening, and I already talked about how the stuff tastes better. But the other thing is how much longer it lasts when you're picking it out your backyard, putting it in the drawer in the refrigerator. The squash and the zucchini and the cucumbers, we're pulling 4 and 5 a day. I got a bin full. You can't eat that many, but they're also not going bad, so you're not throwing them away. And you're trying to share with people, but everybody doesn't love squash and zucchini, so it gets a little hard to throw away, right? But that's when it starts to register to me. Why is our produce section so small, and why do we have such limited, variety in my grocery store, right? Because I don't have the big fancy Whole Foods and the Trader Joe's in my neighborhood. Now they did build one relatively closer, but I like to show people the map of Atlanta. And so we've got 285, which is a bypass that circles the city. And then you've got I-20 that runs east-west. You've got 75-85 that split north and that run north and south. So you look at the map, there are no Whole Foods or Trader Joe's south of I-20. That's an entire half of the city, heavily populated. Why don't the stores go there? We want, contrary to popular belief, we want fruits and vegetables.
Right.
We appreciate the small mom and pop groceries that have propped up these neighborhoods for generations, but it's ultra competitive for them. They've got,
and we're losing them daily,
right? Because they're losing the farms, right? That they get their stuff from. And I didn't know a ton about farmers markets, before I got into gardening, especially the small neighborhood things. And there's been this really, really surge of focus on them in Atlanta because of the disparity. And so learning more about gardening, and that put me in touch with some of the local, not just farmers markets, but the farmers at the markets, right? And so I started to connect with them. And so this weird thing is happening, right? I'm learning, right? Then I'm seeing all these other patterns of like, why aren't they coming to my neighborhoods? Why aren't these stores in my neighborhoods? And why is our produce, you buy a bag of shredded lettuce and you open it, that day, and within 3 minutes, it's already starting to turn. And so you get those experiences. And I come from a background where things weren't always great, and you have to make some really, really hard choices when it comes to food. And one of them, if you don't have the money or you don't have the access to the grocery store, you aren't going to buy stuff that's going bad in 2 days.
Right.
So you're buying the processed, right? And we now have a much better understanding of what happens to your body when you're eating all of this processed stuff and all the high salt, high sodium stuff. And even, me and you've been in the car and we've been riding up and down the street. And I told you, like, when we talked, our strip is fast food. It's fried chicken joints. It's the hot wing joints. And I personally do love hot wings. I get them at least a week. That's if you're from Atlanta and you don't like hot wings, or more importantly, lemon pepper, I question you, but we won't get into that. But what I don't have is anywhere to go grab a fresh salad. I'm not talking about the grocery store prepackaged salad, but I'm talking about something grown locally, that grown by people that care about it, and that's got some kind of ties to the community. That started to eat at me. It's like, why? And that question keeps coming up, why? And so I still don't have the why, but I'm not going to dwell on that. What I did think about was the positive aspect of all the joy that I get from gardening, and not just the harvesting, but watching the process. Going all the way back. Those days when I first started sitting outside on the patio, it was like first day I did, I sat out for like 7-8 hours, literally outside. I had my speaker, Tribe Called Quest, artist radio, sat out there all day under an umbrella. And the next day felt different. And this is going to sound super cliche, I know, but I felt different. Like I just felt more energized. And no joke, I didn't even know that I had been feeling down. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
It was just, I just felt better. And I was like, it's kind of weird. And I was like, so then I start sitting out more every day. And I talked about that love of sitting outside and being outdoors again. It was to the point where that little 10-foot patio was covered with so much gardening stuff that you couldn't walk around on it. It was literally just room for my plants and my chair. And the kids would get up 7, 8 in the morning. I'm already outside. I'm already on my chair. They know when they don't see me, I get up, cup of coffee, grab my laptop, and I go sit out on the patio. And so I internally recognize the benefits of it. And I was like, man, why don't more of us garden, or why isn't this something that is shared more? A lot of it is, the time that it takes, and I only got to experience it because of the COVID shutdown, but I wanted to share that with more people.
Here's the connecting point, that the whole reason I wanted to reach out to you is there's people that want to garden that don't want to farm, you have a profession that you like to do, and that you've been there for a long time. And there's no reason to change that. Enjoy gardening for what it is. But where we're going is, I think you found a way to have the same level of satisfaction that you would if you did go all in, or did go much further than what you want to do. And that's the thing. You want to do what you're fixing to do. You're going to have the same impact, if not more, on the communities, because you're still serving somebody.
Yeah.
That's the super interesting thing about this upcoming project is, A, the experiment of it, but B, I've already seen firsthand with my eyes this week the impact that it's had on the people that live there.
Yeah.
Stopping, being curious, sometimes slowing down, sometimes asking some wild stuff. But I guarantee you that everybody that has passed your yard the last 3 or 4 days, you've been what they've talked about that night.
For sure. You talk about that serving aspect, right? And basically, I recognize that I told you I learned so much from online. I did read books, but I learned so much from YouTube and those who have who's been gardening for years, and they're sharing that knowledge and that love of gardening. And, based upon what you taught me about video and stuff like that, is I said, well, as much as I love it and I enjoy it, I want to share that with others. I want to share the knowledge that I've gained, the experience that I've had, but not from, hey, I'm a gardening expert. I'm not a gardening expert. I'm a third-year gardener, but I love gardening research. I love gardening. I love trying different techniques. You won't catch me say, you've got to do it this way. No. That is complete opposite of me. For me, I want everybody to grow something. Don't care what it is. Particularly something that you can eat, because I feel like that's just a different level of connection. I think the people that love and take care of houseplants, what they do with houseplants is amazing, but it just, for me personally, there's just something slightly different when it's something you eat because of that health connection, the resource, the breaking away. You mentioned professions a few minutes ago. That was the other one that ate at me. And this one, this one eats at me daily. How farmers are looked at culturally, right? I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I know me personally, like, I come from a family that had a family farm back. My grandparents' parents, had a small farm. And I remember seeing the chickens and the cows and the corn and stuff, but I was little too young to fully process it. But we're so completely separated from that now. And culturally, we present farmers as low skill workers. And one thing I learned when it comes to gardening, that's not low skill. And especially if you're a farmer growing at scale for production to feed your family, it's about as skilled as you could possibly get, because they're botanists, they're chemists, they are engineers when they build the stuff, they keep their tractors and their machines working, and many of them do it by themselves or, as families. And so that's just one of those things that came back to me and was like, we've got this all wrong. They should be celebrated and they should be, lifted up in the community, and they should be seen.
And the only thing they ask for is support,
That's it.
just buy what they got.
Right.
At the same time, the things that separate the farmers that make it financially than don't is the farmers that grow food that people want to eat. Numerous times this week, people have come by and you've said, what can I grow for you?
Yep. So you talked about our experiment, and if I go into too much, you can pull me back. But what I want is, because I personally love gardening, I love the work that goes into it. If there's anything that that I did the most this week was shoveling 2 cubic yards of compost in a day, is because I was connected to the dirt. I loved everything we did this week. That was some of the hardest, but I was able to get my hands in dirt, right? And I was gardening again, right?
Boy, and I was going to let you do it.
Yes, you did. My vision is I'm going to take my personal garden and my work, and I'm going to put it out on display for people to see. But more importantly, I want to grow enough to share with my neighbors. And I'm not naive to think that I can share with all of them or grow enough to feed everybody. Ideally, if I hit the lottery though, that's what I would do, because I love it that much. But what I want to do is take my passion for growing food and one, share with the people in my neighborhood, but two, show I'm not special in doing this. I love doing it, but if you've got some room in your yard, on your townhome patio, on your apartment balcony, if you got any sun whatsoever, let's figure out what you can grow just for you to take part and experience this experience that I've had. And, I'm not saying that everybody's going to love it. I'm not naive on that either, but I genuinely want people to try just in case. Right. And if nothing else, you're a gardener in my eyes. You're a gardener if you want to be a gardener, or you are a gardener the moment you go to the grocery store and you buy those grocery store herbs and you bring them home, take them out the plastic, add a little water. You're a gardener. We all have the capability to grow at some scale, and there's something about being connected to your food that is internal that we need to experience. And so I'm going to try this experiment. We work for a week. I'm putting this big garden, not just in my yard, but in my front yard that everybody passes by every day. And I am looking forward to, my neighbors that walk by, especially the ones that ride MARTA. Tell me your favorite vegetable. What do you like? I'm going to try to grow it for you. And you've seen the looks. He's serious. No, yeah, I'm
It's
serious.
here. They know you're serious now. I promise you that.
Yeah, the first couple of days they looked, and the backyard garden was slightly visible, so people knew that I was growing stuff, and I have shared with a few families. Two families in particular helped get their garden started last year, and man, like as much as I love gardening, helping other people start the garden and seeing them get that feeling, and they start texting you the pictures from their garden, dude, it's such a dope feeling. And then they start harvesting from the seeds that you started, and they're feeding them and their family. Like it's just such a high that I get from it.
I liken that to, I remember when we first released the all metal greenhouse, the first one that sold, then the 10th one that sold, and then and then a few weeks later you start seeing the post of it. Now we're building it. Now it's done. And a few months later, you're seeing that same farmer now at the farmer's market. I mean, yeah, I totally get it.
Yep.
Because you're seeing that in your neighborhood, expand that out to watching people all over the country do it. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yep. And I want more of that. I want to be able to share some of the food, but what will make me even happier is if I can get to see more of them start gardens at home. And you don't have to be as extreme as I'm going to go and put it in the front yard, put some in the kitchen, put some on the patio, do it in the backyard traditionally, or go all out, go crazy like I am and put something in your front yard and share with your neighbors. Grow enough for your family and, try some varieties. One of my favorite experiences from the spring is I have a neighbor across the street, and she's my neighborhood it's experienced some of the gentrification that you see in Atlanta. So there are some older families that have been there for a while, and then there's some families that are moving in, like myself and my family, and there's some young and upcomer families. But we all get along really well, right? And so one of my neighbors, she told me she was a master gardener, and that just made my day. But she said she can't do nearly as much, as she used to. But man, she has some collard greens out there that were just absolutely stunning. And she told me how much she used to love growing and eating tomatoes, but she gets the acid reflux from them now.
Right.
And I said, oh, hey, hold on a minute. So I ran her back across the street, and I was growing some yellow pear tomatoes. Again, I thought they looked cool in the picture, and they were different. I don't see them in the grocery store, and so I wanted to try them. And in my research, I saw that they were less acidic. They were more palatable to some people. So I picked a big thing of them, and I took them over to her, and I was like, hey, try these and let me know what you think. If these are still too much, don't feel forced to eat them or nothing like that. Won't hurt my feelings, but just let me know. And if you do like them, let me know, because I got plenty. Like, I'm happy to share with you. And so she tried them, and the next day she saw me. She was like, I didn't have any problems with the acid reflux with those. So I was like, awesome. So I was like, let me know next time you want something. She was like, yeah, I made salads. I was like, I don't say this, just to say it. Next week, if you want some more tomatoes, just wave at me and I'll bring them over. And so she did take a few, and that was one positive. Like, just super, man, it just makes you feel good.
And it doesn't take much to get
No.
you energized for a long time.
Yep.
So speaking of learning, always being a student, basically our hand in this is we've provided different growing systems in which we needed to test, and we wanted to do that with somebody that was going to take it serious and do something good with it. And of course, we've already talked, it's the perfect partnership. So you're going to put these systems through the paces for us for the next few months. And that's something that we're going to take feedback from and do some tweaking and then put that out into the world. So what I just said about, how we felt about the hoop house and how you felt about the feedback that we're going to get from you on these systems is, again, you're trying to serve your neighborhood, and you are, but you're also going to have effect on these later systems that go out into full production. Think about that. Every time something goes out, you've had a hand in directing a garden somewhere else. And that ripple effect that you've been able to create, not only on social, but not only with your friends, but in your neighborhood. And I do see 1,000,000% the impact it's had on your family. I mean, I love spending time with you, because through that I get to spend time with them, and it's just a great functioning unit. I feel right at home when I'm here. It just feels right. So I'm curious, because we're bringing commercial grade farming equipment and systems and scaling it down for a more serious gardener or home gardener. Some of those efficiencies that commercial farmers enjoy that you don't see a whole lot of in the gardening and hobby space. The hobby space is, there's a lot of equipment out there, and just like the trays, there's a lot of stuff that needs a lot of improving, and that's what we're going to do here. So what did you learn this week when it comes to some of those other efficiencies and maybe how things are put together? I mean, I think there's a lot of learning this week.
Oh boy. Wiggle wire and swedge tubes and channel lock. I mean, just, the sky's the limit. Again, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I haven't ever been in a commercial greenhouse or even a large scale farm hoop house. I've seen them a lot now, just because of what I've done with social and the learning that I've done on YouTube and etc. But I just haven't had that exposure, right? And so with what we're doing on this small scale and what it's going to do for me, and being able to extend my growing season in order to, grow tomatoes in a slightly more controlled environment, which, if you know anything about growing tomatoes in Georgia, it can be a tough go. But being able to control that and do it in taking that slightly industrial approach, and then applying it in a way that is accessible to home gardeners, I'm super excited. I know, with what you all have done and what you all have built, I'm super confident in that it's going to work. But I still do have that excitement, that joy of seeing it for the first time up close. We installed the frost blankets today, and If you follow me on social, I lost my entire garden. I was doing my first fall winter garden, and I made the foolish mistake of saying, we have typically pretty mild winters, so I'm gonna go pretty hard this fall winter, and had everything growing, everything was looking beautiful, and we got super unseasonably cold temperatures. We were down to single digits, which we just don't get here. Like we don't have snow trucks and stuff like that because we don't get it. We don't get those temps. And sure enough, man, my plants froze solid, like turned translucent and just ceased to be. Even the ones that were frost tolerant. I mean, 5 degrees with 40-degree winds for 3 straight days. There's just not a lot that's going to survive. And I'll go full circle on that. I chatted with a couple of bigger farmers in the Atlanta area, and I told them, I was like, I lost my little garden, and for you to lose your whole farm, like, man, that hurts. Because now that's income for them, but it is also less food
That's it.
for the underserved communities that they were already breaking their backs to serve. And so I say all that just saying this is why gardening and growing food has always been important. But if you look at what's happening with inflation and the prices and the scarcity, and I'm not one of those people that says run out and panic. So don't let that be my takeaway, but just something's happening and we need to reconnect with our food and with our supplies, and it's time, like right now. And so that's another reason why I want this to be out front in my yard, and so that people can see it. People can walk by and they think, hey, I can try this or I can do this.
Right. And that's why we've never gone the fear mongering route. We want people to be sufficient, self-sufficient. We want them to learn new skills. We want them to, more importantly, learn how to learn new skills.
Yep.
Some of the stuff you learned this week was just, how to put some things together in a different manner. And we've built some things that there's 3 or 4 versions of the same thing. And we talked about why you would use one or over the other. And we've talked about how little you're actually going to have to plant because the production's going to go through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
And then using some of these farming techniques from scale, dialing them down to you instead of having to take care of 10 tomato plants and you're doing 4,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be able to take care of those 4 much better while it's producing as much as the 10 because now it's protected.
And that just gives me more to share. That's where I can nerd out, right? Because I get to play with the plants. You all already helped me with get over seed starting. Like I don't ever want to buy starts again because there's just this amazing feeling about growing from seed to harvest. And what you're allowing me to do is take that, share my knowledge, share the experience, share the harvest. And I just want to do my very, very small part of sharing and showing how to share. And I just want to do that. I want to give back somehow. And it's, I don't say this to say like I've led an incomplete life and I'm actually really happy with my life. I'm really blessed. I'm really fortunate. I've got a profession that I love. We've talked about it. I've got a job that I love that I don't, dread getting up when I go to in the morning. I actually enjoy it quite a bit, but I do also feel like that this gardening journey, I found an extra purpose in life, and I want to see where this goes, and with what you all have taught me and, helped me build, I'm really excited about. I think we are going to do something really special.
Whenever you're adding to what makes your life complete and you didn't set out to do that, and now it's something you can't deny. Obviously, you've picked up the torch. You've recognized that You have been given a gift. People do like what you're saying and how you say it. We're delighted to be a small part of it just by support. We're not the ones doing the work, man. You're going to be the ones doing the work.
You did a lot of work this week.
maybe this week, but it was important that we got this done right, because now you have 4 separate stages to test out your theories.
Mm-hmm.
You have 4 different methods of growing, in addition to what you already had.
Mm-hmm.
Front and center to the whole neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Busy street.
MARTA
buses, school buses, like
broke down U-Hauls. And a couple of helicopters flying over. They're going to see it too. So it's going to be a fun year to watch this happen.
I'm looking forward to it.
I really can't thank enough. It's been a life-changing week. I know several times this week it has made me pause. It does take forever to get anywhere. I see the people getting off the bus. I see the people getting on the bus, and now I've started, even just in this short amount of time. I don't know anybody's name, obviously, but it's like I recognize the same lady getting on the bus at the same time, coming back at the same time. The cat that got off there yesterday, obviously just got off of work, and I was like, man, I'd hate to get off of work and then have to ride a bus. It reminds you of how fortunate we all are in some cases, and we do work with some folks in Dallas doing some tremendous things. In the same thing, when you were describing, there's no Whole Foods south of a certain highway here. The exact same things happen in Dallas, which tells me it's happening in every major metropolitan area and smaller metropolitan areas. I mean, there's these pockets of places that need lights to be shined on them, and here we are.
And I can sit and complain about it not happening and not really get anything done. And I like this approach of just trying something. I don't expect
you're the one in a million that got up their ass and did something about it.
I just want to try. And it could all fall flat. Everybody could hate it. I could, be the crazy guy at the end of the street, but
in 19 years, you won't be telling somebody else trying something. Yeah, I had an idea like that about 19 years ago, and I didn't do it.
Yeah. I feel like I have to try, and I have to share how it goes, regardless, the good and the bad. I shared that I lost my entire fall winter garden, and
and I love that you have the support of those closest to you. Your family, they're engaged and they're involved, and I see the support in it, and that's got to make things way easier.
Yeah, they get it. They're not the biggest lovers of everything that I grow, but again, just those small things. When my daughter in the summer, she makes her cucumber water with the mint that she sees, at the high end, places, and it's like there's nothing high end about cucumber and water, and mint and water, but that's just the connection.
I promise you, hers is better than any spa in town.
Yeah, but just being able, and what I told them too. I do this to show them, but I'm not telling them that they have to garden,
right?
Because I do it. But heck, it'd be great if I can continuously do this and grow enough that as they age and they get families, and if they decide to have, children, that they can come to me and get fresh, food and stuff like that. Like, it's just something I want to be able to continue to do long term. And so, what you all have set me up with and what this equipment we're going to try, this isn't stuff that I'm going to be able to, that I'm going to need to replace next year. We're going to be growing big time for a very, very long time.
You've wanted to help the community, but just the things that your kids are going to pick up that, we haven't discussed. They're going to see you working hard. They're going to see you falling in love with something that has an impact in multiple ways. Mm-hmm. And they're going to see you just take a risk and go after it. Mm-hmm. And man, I don't know of a more valuable lesson to give somebody.
I'm seeing that up close already, right? So my son's just turned 18, just started college, and we talk a lot. We've spent a lot of time talking about culture and change, and one of the conversations that we had is how so much is so much change has to be systemic. But in order for something to be systemic, it still has to start with one small person. And I told him is I want to see change in food and our accessibility to food, but I don't have the ability to go snap my fingers and put grocery stores in everybody's neighborhood. But what I can do is just share the little techniques that I've learned just as a small scale grower, but just, you can impact change on a small scale. And so we had a heart to heart about that. And I was like, I just feel it's my responsibility to share. He took that to heart, and he'd always, follow my stuff. But sure enough, he went and started sharing more of my content like on his feed, and he recognized that. And I recognized that in that moment, it sparked something in him. He started to recognize that value of change. And I've watched him, as reserved as he is, he's now starting to push out. He loves music. And so he's starting to push out some of the music that he's experimenting with creating. And to see him posting videos online, the dude, he hates cameras even more than me. So I do recognize that in this moment that I'm even helping him grow and share his love. And like you said, take that chance. There's no guarantee any of it's going to work, but it for sure doesn't work if you never try. So try it. And this goes well beyond gardening. There's a trending audio right now that says you will never accomplish what you want if you're too worried about looking stupid. I won't be the one out dancing, so you forget about that part. But the stuff that I'm comfortable in, this gardening thing, this trying to figure out how to teach and share, I'm gonna give it my all.
Can't think of a better way to close this one out. Love you, man. Thank you for a hell of a week.
Love you too, brother.
It's going to be a very exciting year to watch this happen. We're going to be sharing it. You're going to be sharing, there's going to be two paths to follow. There's the part that you do for us, and then there's going to be the daily part that you do for your own channel. Highly encourage everybody, if you're in this space, even if you're a big time farmer, there's always something to learn from everybody. Hop on it. ATL Grow.
That's it. And for y'all, hey, you see me growing stuff, you see me doing stuff. If you got tips, I'm open. I do get a little prideful if somebody's, saying you got to do it this way because that's just not my style. But hey, I'm here to learn. My thing is learn and grow with us. Let's do this together.
All right. Well, that's that, folks. We'll be sharing some stuff as we can and as it comes out. But seed starting basically for you starts tomorrow.
That's it.
And now you got a place to put them. And we'll see how it is throughout the season.
Unplug me, the whole scene about to get ugly. I've been the star of the show, that's why the spotlight on me. Yo, Sub-Zero, cold like the intro. We the superheroes with the classified info. It's so official, yo. You know it's classic. Yo, my shit is certified. I got badges. Right. Pass that big L, man. Put out the ashes. I got a team of crumb snatchers on your ass, kid. White polos, I guess that's how I'm feeling. A box of black J's stacked way up to the ceiling. Shit, I ain't bragging, nah. I ain't flossing. I'm just fly as fuck when I step out. The feeling is awesome. I'm like a vigilante. Rest in peace to my granny. Pull up in a Mercedes. I know these haters can't stand me. Do it for Ovi, the only one that can show me how to do it for the love. Now that's my angel above me. I'm ghost.